Hey, TechKnowStuds! You know, if you're listening to this course, you're probably already sold on using Packet Tracer. But I did want to let you know there are some other options and some of the pros and cons of these other options. So let's just get into that first. First thing to understand is there are different option types. We have the physical equipment, or we could be working with an emulator, or we could be working with a simulator. And let me just give you an example. Let's say I have a Cisco 2960 switch, and I physically have that. It's a Catalyst 2960. Now I'm actually working on the actual equipment. So anything that I experience is going to be in real life. It's going to be what I would actually experience if I was working with a Cisco Catalyst 2960. There's no mimicking, there's no faking. It is what it is. However, what a simulator does is a simulator is software that simulates that it is a piece of equipment that you're working with. So it's software that you're interacting with. If you type in a command, you're giving it that command, and then in return, it's giving you some sort of programmed response. It's much different than actually working on the physical equipment. And the responses you get could be a little different than the actual physical equipment. And it could be a little bit buggier, and there are some issues when working with simulators. Emulators are in between. Emulators are emulating the hardware side of it. So you don't actually work with the actual hardware. However, you do have the operating systems that you are installing on there and working with the operating system. So it's pretty close to actually working on the physical equipment, but you're taking away the actual physical equipment, so there could be some variation when you're working with an emulator. Now, I will say that there is one advantage to the emulator that we have, and that is you can turn up as much hardware as you want and install the operating system on it and really test things out. So there is some utility beyond just getting the certification. A simulator is just good for studying for the certification. And the hardware, you can do some like mock setups and stuff. But with an emulator, in the future, you could actually set things up and test things out. Now, I haven't seen a big need for that, but it is common to do that before you actually launch changes within your environment, is to test it out on an emulator. Another option is do you want to install something on your client, or do you want to have something up in the cloud? The advantage of it being up in the cloud is, once again, a lot of times this is a lot easier to use. You just log into it and then you start working through the labs. However, usually there's a little more of a cost when it's involved in that. And there are examples of client and cloud for physical emulators and simulators. In fact, I have a lot of my students are using a physical setup that's up in the cloud and they log in. That's through the college that I teach through. So what do I recommend? Well, like I say, ideally we would actually be working on the physical equipment. I think there's the best learning curve when it comes to this model right here. So just purchasing the equipment would be the number one recommendation I'd have. However, that can get a little costly and there's some delays and it can be a little complicated at times. So then we have Packet Tracer here as a simulator. And then finally, we also have GNS3 is a great way to be practicing for your certs, but also have some of that, be able to have some of that utility or some of that usage that you can use even after studying for the certifications. Of course, it is more complicated to go this route. There are some other options that are out there. I'm not trying to limit you to any other options. Boson NetSim would be an example of that. Cisco Virtual Internet Routing Lab would be an example of that. And EVE-NG would be another example. If you are unsure about this, just go with Packet Tracer and start using Packet Tracer. As you get deeper into it, if you want to buy the physical equipment or get into GNS3, then you can go down that route. But just start out with Packet Tracer, start using it, and start advancing your knowledge now, and then you can worry about the details later if you want to get some experience on the physical equipment.